Welcome back to Yankee Chronicle, the who, what, where, and when show of the Lake Sunapee region. I'm your host, Abby Peel. The mission of the Lake Sunapee Protective Association is to preserve and protect the quality of the waters in our watershed. Let's now head over to the lab and Colby-Sawyer College to learn more. Hi, ladies.
Yeah, so LSPA has had a water quality lab for several decades now. We have a long-term data set that goes back almost 30 years, and it began some of our early volunteers that decided that they wanted to take water quality data. I think the first lab was in someone's kitchen, and then, more than 20 years ago, we had the opportunity to move the lab here to Colby-Sawyer, and it's been just an incredible partnership since then. And it's an important partnership between Colby-Sawyer College, Lake Sunapee Protective Association, and also the Department of Environmental Services. So this is their only satellite lab in the state where we take in water quality samples from over 25 lakes in the region, and several of those lakes are bringing those samples here to the lab at Colby-Sawyer.
So here at the lab we follow strict EPA protocols that we get. They're developed at the Department of Environmental Services, and then we follow those protocols. So we are generating quality, accurate data that can be relied on for people to make decisions about the quality of the lakes in this region.
Fortunately, we're able to document that the water quality is high. It's phenomenal in Lake Sunapee. It's one of the highest quality lakes in the state, and we work really hard to keep it that way. And it's helpful to have a long-term data set that can track that, and also to help us pinpoint where there might be issues that we do need to address, because the water quality isn't uniform across a lake. It varies from location to location, and that helps us pinpoint where we need to address some of the management issues.
Yesterday, the interns and several of the staff members were out on Lake Sunapee, and we were taking our normal water samples from the deep sites, and then we also did what we're calling an E. coli blitz, where we take a lot of water samples from all of the different regular water monitoring stations that we have, just to compare E. coli values throughout the watershed. So the interns processed all of the samples when we got back to the lab yesterday afternoon, and the big envelopes that you saw were those samples that had been incubated overnight, and now they're ready to be read. We have this new system as of last year that was funded by a donor foundation, and it's the same system that the DES uses, so we're secure in that, in the values that we're getting. And we put food into the E. coli samples, and then we incubate them overnight, and then we put them under UV light, and the food will have reacted with the E. coli, and they fluoresce. So if they're fluorescing, we know that they have E. coli colonies within that little well, that column. Then we count the wells that are fluorescing, and we use a sheet that EPA and IDEX have developed to give us the most probable number of E. coli colonies that are in that water sample.
So you all probably remember a few years ago when we had incredibly high water levels on Lake Sunapee, and a lot of the calls that we were getting into the center were people that were concerned about potential E. coli contamination from a lot of the septic systems that were suddenly underwater. And I came to Teriko and I said, what data do we have about E. coli that will help us to understand this issue? And we realized that we probably weren't collecting as much E. coli data as we could be. And one of the limiting factors was the equipment that we had meant that it took a long time to be able to process those samples. So when we had a donor that reached out and said, what equipment do you need in the water quality lab, we knew that that would be a good fit to invest in some of the same equipment that DES uses to analyze E. coli. And that's allowed us to gather far more data and to have a much better understanding of where there might be issues with E. coli on the lake. I think one of the things that we're really fortunate to have is this long-term data set. A lot of times when researchers that are affiliated with other institutions, they might get funding that lasts 3 years, 4 years, that's related to maybe a PhD thesis project. And it's really difficult to generate long-term data sets with short funding cycles like that. Because of our donors and our members at LSPA, we're able to fund this long-term project where we are consistently collecting data in the same way, and it gives us just such a rich source of data over time.
So every summer, LSPA provides funding for college interns here at the lab. This year, we're lucky enough to have 3 wonderful interns. We have Isabella here from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, a recent grad.
So I graduated from RPI this past May with a degree in environmental science. And part of my big interest in being here is kind of figuring out what I want to do and everything. I studied some lakes and some freshwater streams in university, but it's really nice to actually see the application of everything that I studied, like in the lab and getting to go out in the field and collecting the samples and everything. And
so we really rely on interns that work in the water quality lab every summer, and it helps us out tremendously to be able to process all the samples. But there's also an added benefit where they're learning skills, they're able to learn skills that they can apply in their future careers, and so it also provides us with an opportunity to really train the next generation of lake scientists.
They're just such an inspiration to me, and it's a lot of fun to work with the different personalities every summer. Environmental conservation is such an important part, it's such an integral part of where we live here in New Hampshire.
You know, all of the water quality samples that we process in the lab are collected by either volunteers or staff or interns, and I know that we do have some opportunities for volunteers that we're looking for a few more to help us collect water samples. So if anyone's interested, you can visit our website and find volunteer opportunities there.
Thank you to Elizabeth and Teriko for your efforts to preserve the wonderful asset that is our Lake Sunapee and its watershed.